Here, I'm lucky enough to have got my hands on Analogue Solutions' first ever polysynth. It's called the Maximus, and what you're looking at here is just the optional controller keyboard, which in itself is a very sexy bit of kit, but it's completely useless without the rest of the synth. So where are all the knobs? Well, they're all up here in this hugely imposing, almost 1 meter squared, massive box of tricks. And if something's this large, is the designer officially considered to be an architect, I wonder? But what we have here are 8 independent voices, each of which is almost a completely self-contained monosynth, each having 2 oscillators and a sub, noise, a multi-mode filter, its own 16-step sequencer, plus 2 ADSR envelopes, and its own BBD analog delay circuit. And I say they're almost completely self-contained monosynths because on the bottom main controller panel, we've got the overall tuning and cutoff on the left-hand side, followed by 3 LFOs that are shared between the voices, and then we've got a main CV input controller section, followed by MIDI and sequencer controller, and then we've got an 8-track stereo mixer for all the voices, and to top it all off, a stereo spring reverb at the very end of the signal chain. And what does that all mean? Well, although it looks like the ghost of an Oberheim 8 voice, it's actually a lot more flexible than that. Having a sequencer on each of the tracks really opens it up. Yet you can do polysynth style things with it, but having the sequencers turns it into an 8-track analog studio, really. I've been using it with the 4 top tracks as synth lines and the 4 bottom tracks as drum tracks. And because you've got individual outputs, you can record all those separately to your DAW, although everything that you hear in this has been recorded via the stereo outputs, including that first jam, the one coming up, and the one at the very end. Is it just me, or are there not that many songs in the charts anymore that use the mistreatment of silkworms as an analogy for social oppression? I don't know, maybe I'm not listening to Ed Sheeran's lyrics deeply enough. Okay, a quick overview of what it is. Well, it's a polysynth. It's got the 8 voices, as I've mentioned, and we can have it in poly mode or mono mode. I'll put it in mono mode for now. When it's in mono mode, without the cyclic on, it plays all the voices at the same time. I've roughly tuned them. This sort of LED down here indicates how many or which voices are playing. That's all of them. And I'm playing there, that's 16 oscillators all at the same time. Let's take the spring reverb off. Beautiful, that, isn't it? Really vintage sounding. I've got the delay on all the oscillators as well. Let's knock that off. So there are 16 voices all slightly detuned, or 16 oscillators all slightly detuned. And that's just a big, magnificent mono sound, isn't it? If we go to cyclic mode, it'll play through each of the oscillators. So you can hear they're all slightly different. And again, as a player, you can see this LED moving around, showing you which is actually playing, and the LEDs on the front panel light up as well. And then we've got poly mode, and they'll play like a poly synth. So, and it's all sounding a bit out of tune because it's slightly detuned to make the big fat mono sounds. I've not got that sound in its best, have I? But the thing is with this, because you've got to go and change everything on all the voices to do a big poly sound, I think you have to really set it up to be, today I'm going to play it as a big poly synth, or today I'm going to play it as a mono synth, or today I'm going to play it like a workstation almost. Really vintage, so it does sound like something from the 70s, that, doesn't it? But I've got to say, if you want to do standard pad sounds, you don't get this. You do something that's got standard pad sounds in it. This is much more of an organic instrument. We've spent a bit of time going through each of the voices here and making sure that all the oscillators are in tune, and using the detune to make sure the second oscillator is in tune. If I just pull all this down. So that's pretty spot on, and bring another one in. And you'll notice it doesn't sound as big and rich as it did when it was detuned. And that's because if I want to play a chord, got to put it into poly mode, it sounds a lot better. Let's just take all these delays off so we can hear what's happening. And the reverb. So that's our big 8-voice mono sound. But with without the detune, let's add oscillator 2. So you can see how in tune that is, but that does make chords work. But to be honest, it's just not what I do with this. It can sound big and rich, and you can go in and tweak it and that. But if you're going to do something like that, just get yourself an Oberheim, isn't it? What I think it's nice for is doing interesting things, being a little bit more creative. Play that, for example. You need a polysynth to do that, but let's change one of the notes. So it plays 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's go into voice 5. Let's put that onto a pulse. Bring the other voices down so we can hear 5 a bit louder. Let's turn the cutoff on that up and the others down a little. So making a different tone per voice. I mean, I'm not doing a huge amount there, but let's put a bit of delay on there as well. Maybe put some noise on the first one. You get the idea, trying to make it a little bit sort of different per note. And then taking that a little bit further, perhaps put it into mono mode onto cycle, and then it'll cycle through each of the 8 voices. So each voice is doing something different. Let's put a load of noise on one of them. Bit like you can do on the mono poly. But yeah, it does work as a poly synth. Let's try that in poly. And in cyclic mode in poly, it doesn't just go from note 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then the next one, 6, 7, 8. So loads of ways to get really creative and create stuff that you just can't do on other things. So I'll just run through what else we've got down here. We've got a master offset for bringing all the voices again. Got master tune. Got a master detune. This is detuning oscillator 2 on each of the voices. Whoops. And then we got a master cutoff as well. And this doesn't do the full range of the cutoff, it's just a sort of partial range of the cutoff. I think that's mainly because it's a big polysynth thing. If we're bringing all the voices. Then we've got a mult, because obviously we've got lots of CV connections, followed by 3 LFOs. There's the 3 independent frequencies. LFO1 and LFO2 are a square or a triangle, and LFO3 has got square, triangle, ramp, and sawtooth and different outputs down here. LFO1 and LFO2 also have some pre-patched destinations like the cutoff. Got the cutoff on both of them. Then we've got things like the pitch of oscillator 1, oscillator 2 on both of them, and the pulse width on LFO2. Following that, we've got some global controls that you can control everything via a CV in. Then we've got a MIDI setup, so up and down the octaves. This keyboard isn't a MIDI keyboard, it's got its own special cable, so you can't use this for anything else other than the Maximus. Although the Maximus itself does have MIDI on the back, so you can play it via MIDI if you want. MIDI receive and transmit channels, and we use these keys down here to do that. And then on the sequencer, we've got note 0, just like you have on lots of the other Analogue Solutions stuff, like on the Fuse box or on the Ample or on the Leipzig. So you play note 0, which is note C -2, I think, on your DAW, and that progresses it through the sequence, so you can have it at any rhythm you like, which is really cool. Then obviously we've just seen the cyclic mode and the mono modes and poly modes. Sending MIDI clocked 16ths and stuff, so you can really integrate it in your setup if you want to. Then we got the stereo mixer, and it really does sort of remind me quite a lot actually of the Colossus. It's got lots of the same sort of things. Colossus, the Quartz that had a 10-channel stereo voice mixer. This has got an 8-channel. We've got the same vernier pots for the tuning and stuff like that. So loads of similarities there. Yeah, then we go down to the spring reverb. And the master level. So that's a quick overview of what it is. And I say it's a quick overview. It's, it's quite a simple machine, but because of all the connections you got on it, you can do very complex things like that track I've just played on it. So it's almost like a 1970s style workstation. Let's take a look at the individual voices then, shall we? We've got 2 oscillators, a sub, noise and external input on each. But starting on the left-hand side, we've got a really nice looking vernier tuning knob, very reminiscent of the synthy, and that gives us really good control when we go into this wide keyboard mode. We've got normal keyboard mode, which you'd expect to follow the keys. Take that off and we get into a wide range. So each of the voices can be an LFO. And we've got an output here so you can send it to wherever you like. So it can be an LFO or it can be an FM source. Let's put it back into normal mode. This detune knob here is for oscillator 2. So if we blend between 1 and 2. And we've also got portamento, which is very nice, isn't it? And to the modulation section, we've got pulse width. So let's put it onto a pulse. Listen just to VCO1. For PWM, we use the main controller panel, LFO to PWM. It's LFO2. Square. And that works for VCO2 as well. So let's put them both back on a sawtooth. We've got 2 CV inputs for the pitch, one for pitch 1 and 2, and one just for pitch of 2. And we've got sync as well. And we can also modulate them independently using envelope 1 or envelope 2. So let's put sync on. And let's modulate oscillator 1. Moving over to the other side out of the view of the camera, I'm going to just play with that envelope. And everything I do just sounds really fat and juicy, doesn't it? It's a wonderful sounding synth. Let's bring the sub in. So let's listen to voice 1 or VCO1. Take sync off. Sub. Sounds like a square. You can't just listen to the sub and you can't listen to the noise on its own. And I did ask Analogue Solutions about that, and that was deliberate so that you get a sort of textured noise, that you don't just get a clean, straight noise. So I think that about covers the mixer section. So if you wanted something that was mainly noise, you could go to the pulse width, reduce that, and then play with the filter, and that brings me nicely on to the filter. So this is a really interesting filter, and we've got high pass, band pass, and low pass. And what's interesting here is if we haven't got any of them switched in, we're not going to hear anything. So let's switch the high pass in. Or the band pass. Or the low pass. Nice that, isn't it? 12 dB filter. And then I can bring in the high pass as well. So a high pass and a low pass basically gives you a notch, doesn't it? Bring in the band pass as well. Turn the resonance down. Just a really weird, interesting sound. Bring some resonance in. So yeah, loads to play with in there. And then of course we've got the modulation inputs. We've got the envelope, velocity, so it is velocity sensitive. And with the CV input, we can use this touch strip. We've got CV and gate for each. Let's put CV1. So there's a touch strip here and a touch strip there. Let's put the CV into that. I'm not going to demo how you use the sequencer, really. It's all in the manual. It's all pretty simple. We've got 16 steps. Flick through them, we get to step 9, and we've got a little dot on the 1. This takes us up to step 16, and that's the end step. So we could have the end step as step 3. And then when we play it, so enable it, press play down here, we only flick through 1, 2, and 3. We're currently looking at the step, moving through the steps. But if we want to look at the step value, we push this, and now we're looking at the note, so we can change the note. So C sharp, D, E, F, F sharp. It doesn't show the octave, which can be a bit fiddly when you're trying to do some stuff, but, you know, just got to slow yourself down and do things like that. So that's the pitch. Cut off is denoted by this, so quite a cool way. And when cut off is on that, so just the sort of minus sign, it's gated off. So that's how you turn the notes on and off. And you can have it looping, or you can have it in a one-shot mode. So have it in one-shot mode, press start. 1, 2, 3, and it stops. Whereas in looping mode, it'll carry on playing. So that's it, really simple, 16 steps, and it'll modulate the pitch and the cutoff. Controlled by the main sequencer control down here that I showed earlier. We can have note 0, that's note C-2, I think, external clock or LFO2. And just to show it being used by an external clock, I've got this little metronome here, which is a brilliant little MIDI metronome, I suppose, with various output modes, and I will plug that into the MIDI clock or the external clock in. Let's play on that. Put this onto external clock, press play. So I've been having fun playing with that as well. I might show that in another video. Very cool, the metronome. So I'll put a link to that in the description, actually, because if you're doing stuff with CV and playing around with different instruments, this is almost a must. It's been a lifesaver because I've been trying to do stuff when I was working with the Colossus as well and trying to use different drum machines. Was, you know, good find that. Moving over to the envelopes, there's not a lot to say about the envelopes. We've got 2 ADSR envelopes, nice and snappy. And you can see here, we can trigger that either with MIDI or the keyboard or with the sequencer. So, play the sequencer. So when you've got it on keyboard, MIDI, trig and the sequencer, you can transpose your sequencers. Let's put this onto MIDI as well. And finally, we've got the BBD circuit, and this is lovely. Course time on or off. Let's put course time on. Oh, let's turn the mix up. So that's shorter times, longer. So quite long, that really. So let's go into self-oscillation. So yeah, you can get all those nice analogue BBD effects from it. A lot of distortion if that's what you're after. Taking it back into normal territory. But thinking that you've got one of these on all the voices really does make things great for pads and stuff, because everything's just slightly out. So I think that covers what you can do with each of the voices. It's all quite simple because each of them is like an independent little monosynth, so there's nothing too complex in there. But obviously you can start patching things in if that's what you want to do. And because the synth is a MIDI synth, it means that if you're playing something with your DAW and you want to sync up LFOs with your DAW, you can if you've got a DC coupled interface. Like this Arturia, I've been using the Audio Fuse 16 rig. You can use things like VCV Rack or Soft Tube Modular to sync up LFOs onto this. So it does integrate, even though it's a big old weird sort of very ancient looking and feeling thing, you can actually sync it up and get it to integrate really well with a modern setup. So there it is, the Analogue Solutions Maximus. It sounds fabulous, it looks fabulous, it's priced accordingly. It's not an impulse buy at £20,000 or thereabout. Just the keyboard alone, which is an optional extra, will cost you about £2,000. But wow, what a machine. I've really enjoyed having it here. I've really loved playing with it. I wish I'd got a bit more time with it. I'd like to do some more polysynth textural things, using the sequences and the LFOs to do different things on each of the voices. Maybe that's for another time. But hopefully I've given a good overall impression of what it is, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please think about subscribing, ring the bell, join me over on Patreon, where for less than the price of a Grand Chai Latte 3-pump skimmed milk, light water, no foam, extra hot per month, you get access to packages, samples and other Patreon exclusive bits and bobs. Or do take a look at my starskycar.com website, where I've got patches, samples and things, but I've yet to add any merch. Anyway, thanks for staying to the very end. In fact, this isn't the very end. I've got that little jam coming up, the Joy Division one I mentioned in the intro. Did the last night after a couple of beers, having loads of fun, and that's what this sort of stuff is about. Anyway, I will see you next time.